This is a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.
Welcome to the Brighton Central School District Community Forum for Tuesday, February 15th. A couple of things to note here, please. In a moment, we're going to ask Dr. McGowan and Lou Limo to do a budget overview. I will also note, Dan Goldman, raise your hand back there in the corner. If you would like to speak, Dan will give you an index card to fill out, and it will be delivered to me, and I will call you. We ask that you just give your name and school district of residence, no street addresses for security reasons, and we'll allocate 5 minutes per speaker, and the same general rules will apply. Do not directly or indirectly, our students are watching. We consistently state that personal attacks or denigration will not be allowed towards anyone. You can provide your feedback or state your disagreement with policies or practices without attacking a person's character. Andrea Costanza, board member Andrea Costanza, will hold up the yellow card at the 4-minute 30-second mark, and then the red card at the 5-minute mark for anybody who chooses to speak. But as mentioned, to begin with, we will start with introductory budget comments.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody, and to our community members, certainly we'd like to start this off. We're in budget season. The community forum, of course, is open to feedback on any number of topics, but we do want to share the results of the budget survey. This presentation in greater detail was also given during the 5 o'clock meeting with some information at the beginning about expenditures, where we are in the process, other information around our conclusions and considerations going forward. So I'd encourage people to take a look at that if they'd like even more information. The point of this, though, is really just to spark part of the conversation around the feedback from the community in terms of the budget process that we're in the midst of right now. The question we asked, and an important part of our process, is to go out and gather feedback. And so we asked our community, as we plan the budget, what should be prioritized? What's most important to you? What should we be considering as we review expenses, taxes for next year, programs in place, programs reduced, any other aspects of the budget? And as I mentioned at 5 o'clock, I'd really like to think differently as we go into that question for next year in terms of framing the conversation around nobody wants their expense to go up. There's nobody here that would say, yes, I would like to pay more taxes without understanding what the impact of that is. In other words, what would you like us to do relative to programs when you consider a tax increase? If it would require us reducing programs, what would that mean for you in terms of your willingness to support a tax increase? I think is a different way to provide context to that question. The results of this question, though, are something that we'd like to talk about. 600 participants in the exchange sharing 374 thoughts. And as I mentioned earlier, 29,000 star ratings. That's simply the number of ratings applied to the thoughts. 64% of those responding were caregivers, so of K through 12 students. 14%, 82 people, which is a good number of community members without children in school, and 22% staff members participating in the exchange as well. So a good representation across the board. In terms of what roles did people have and how did that break out relative to their level, Council Rock was 26%, Fres 25%, middle school 27%, and the high school 36%. So pretty even across the board as well. 10% K through 12 and 12% did not answer a particular level. What were the words basically that people emphasized in the process? They came up most in the comments. Enrichment, trips, snow days were a pretty common topic that came up as well. We understand the feedback on that. There were lots of messages and comments, thankfulness and appreciativeness as well, mental health, learning, enrichment, academic programming as well, mentioned often in the thoughts. Our top 3 thoughts overall in the exchange: keep academic programming, don't eliminate classes. It's why our kids are in school was the #1 thought shared. Quality of instruction, great teachers engage kids, and make learning was #2 in the exchange. And prioritize writing and communicating. These skills will be required in any and all jobs and life was the 3rd comment overall in the exchange. So clearly, people in our community expressing academic rigor, academic excellence, programming is awfully important to us. By total thoughts, so the themes, so the artificial intelligence of the platform, where did these fall? What buckets did they fall into? A whole bunch of comments, 130 of the comments or so fell into the miscellaneous category. But other than that, specific comments related to kids, taxes, classes, programs, staff member pay, staff overall, support for staff, snow days, and you can see a few comments also about later start times. How did it apply? Pretty even across the board, almost 3.5 star ratings in each of those on average, each of those theme categories. In terms of samples of those comments from the themes around classes, keep academic programming, don't eliminate classes, please focus on academics, replace teachers who retire rather than creating part-time positions or cutting positions altogether. So every year we look, when people are leaving positions, at what do we do with that position? What's the most efficient way to fill that need, that personnel need in the district? So this thought may be coming from a misunderstanding. It could be also just coming from somebody really feeling as though when you cut those positions into pieces, you don't attract as many candidates or the same quality candidates, and you increase class sizes as well, I think is what this person is getting at. Foreign language, several thoughts regarding foreign language. Introducing Spanish, other languages earlier. Start foreign language in elementary school, foreign language at 6th grade, which we have restored, mentioned here as well. But the younger you learn a new language, the easier, and start by age 3, important to that person as well. In terms of taxes, increase the quality of education. Keep all the programs. Bring back things that have been cut and don't cut taxes, which is certainly a challenge to do all those things at the same time. But feedback that we understand that people would say, I want you to keep everything, but also don't increase taxes. Be careful of costs. Please find a way to lower or at least freeze taxes now that state funding is increasing. And a point we made earlier that we want to keep emphasizing with people is we are really very, very glad that state funding is increasing. However, it's important to point out that yes, we've moved from the under 50%, around 50% of our foundation aid to 60% last year, to 80% going into this year. That's still a 20% shortfall from what we are supposed to be getting, driven by actual student need, driven by the actual demographics of our students and the needs of our students. So important again for people to understand, and when we read some of these responses, it reminds us of the things that we need to educate in our community on and communicate regarding as well. So certainly understand that sentiment also. Bus drivers mentioned, invest in teachers. They are first responders as well as cafeteria workers. Bus drivers, drop-off pickup situation at the high school, middle school is not ideal. This came up a couple times, including in the next comment. We recognize that as well. It has not been ideal or ideal for a very long time. That traffic pattern is relatively predictable too, and we would encourage people to think about safety and ways to approach that the best that they possibly can in terms of their timing or taking advantage of the transportation system could reduce that as well. Field trips continue to offer opportunities for K through 12 students, extracurricular activities, sports, art, music, etc. Restore field trips, enrichment opportunities for students, all ranked very high by our community. And in terms of programs, maintain language and music programs, education programs specifically, math, science, technology, controlling costs while keeping facilities and programs at high levels. Support, counselor service. We saw a lot of comments around mental health support, continued access to free meals for students as well. That is a government-supported program, federal government-supported program. Teachers need more leadership support. As a parent, I've watched our teachers do wonderful things for our students, and they are increasingly burning out. Invest in our teachers, no question about that. We're seeing that happen across the region and, in fact, across the country as well. We're very aware of that. Quality of instruction, prioritize writing and communicating, focus on teachers in the classroom, not administrators. We keep hiring the latter when kids would benefit from the former. And as I pointed out earlier, you know, putting this up on the screen, there's a vulnerable space for us to say, yes, that's the honest feedback from community members. It also reminds us we need to continue to help people understand that our team is actually leaner than any other team regionally and anywhere close to us, and continues to be very much so, that there is a significant impact. And if you look at the positions we've actually hired, particularly with the federal funding that we reviewed earlier this evening, they are significantly in the teacher and staff category, many, many, many positions in that area. So the impact, and if we go back again, something very proud to say of Jeff Green's work, his presentation earlier, I think is a great demonstration of how powerful that impact can be, whether it's the director of student and family engagement or many other positions. However, we're actually less than we previously were in terms of the number of people. We've reallocated positions, looked at that differently, and still not filled positions as well. So that is a fair comment, and one that, you know, I think is one often cited in many organizations relative to the impact on kids for teachers to be in front of them. These are interesting slides just to point out the differences for community members. These are two selected group of people who have similar starring patterns to a thought. So 141 people, fell into a category where they looked at most thoughts in the exchange in a very similar way. The other group of people, 101 people, the green circle up on the top right of the screen, looked at things in a very similar way. They're Group A and Group B. On the left side, prioritize later start times for middle and high school students. Later start times are better for their mental health. That was ranked 4.6 by those 141 people. The 101 people, the green group, side B, did not rank that as high. There's a pretty interesting division there among people on that particular thought. Likewise, the next thought, swapping start times. Younger kids go to school early, middle and high school start later. Pretty interesting division on that. The same group of people, right? So the people who are prioritizing later start times, swapping start times, on the other side of the ledger are not as supportive of a budget that includes new and innovative programming. I'm not supportive of a budget that includes $500,000 in new spending to switch the start times of CRPS and BHS. They didn't feel great about that because obviously on the other side they said, this is what I'd like to do. That's what a priority is for me. And keep at least 1 to 2 snow days for kids. It's a small boon joy for children living in the long land of winter. They did not rank that as high, that particular group of people, whereas side B did. But where do they agree? And this is really where the focus should be more than anything, whether the issue start times, whatever it might be. I think as you see in several successive slides, keep academic programming, don't eliminate classes. It's why our kids are in school. Quality of instruction, great teachers engage kids, and make learning, I'm assuming probably fun came at the end of that as well. In terms of language learning differences, again, 2 different groups of people, a Group A and a Group B. Group A, a side A, I appreciate the science-driven approach to masking. Please continue to encourage masking as long as recommended by the Monroe County Department of Health. That 166 people, 4.7, very high ranking for that. There's a group of people saying, I don't feel the same way, 1.2, very low ranking, that 51 people in this other group. The same group, side A, strongly feel bring back programs, especially arts, music, that may have been reduced or cut. The other group does not agree. It doesn't feel that way. Side B, stop the masking. Very high rank, shouldn't be a surprise since on the other side of the ledger they ranked the other science-driven approach, etc., low. Give the money back and unmask our kids. Ranked high, low by Group A, that on the other side of that ledger was in favor of masking. But again, where do people agree? Please focus on academics. We know so many people feel they have to use private tutors and learning centers just to keep up. Spend money in areas that directly impact students, the comment before that we discussed as well. Agreement on those comments. So our conclusions in reading through the data and thinking through what's been presented to us are this. And I would point out, conclusions are in the eye of the beholder, right? So anybody in the exchange, and we will send out the summary reports, can draw their own conclusions from the data and have access to all of that information. And the board will have the opportunity to continue to review that and has had the opportunity to review that data. But in my presentation of what conclusions are, maintaining programs is a priority for the community. Clearly that was agreed upon in several of the differences slides. Academic excellence continues to be a priority. Continuing to build programs and innovate is essential. Cost is an important consideration. So let's not lose sight of that. These are not in rank order and specifically not numbered for that reason. Cost is an important consideration. Tax impact must be considered. There were several comments in the exchange, and clearly that is an issue that the community would continue to like for us to keep in mind, as has been expressed and has always been in your mind in the budget process. And our community supports thoughtful investment that is focused on student impact. Very common themes throughout the exchange as well. So that's just a summary of the data that we wanted to make sure as part of this community forum was shared as well, and may either answer questions or prompt more questions and greater dialogue, and wanted the community to hear that also. I've presented it once to you already, but any questions from board members before I move on?
I have a question.
Avram, you're going to have the chance to come up here in 1 second, but I'm just asking, as part of this, you can certainly ask that question. Anything else?
No.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Avram, I appreciate that.
I've got 2 requests to speak. As I stated, we request that the speaker states their name and their school district of residence. The first request I have here is from Megan.
Hi everyone, Megan, Brighton resident. In light of recent updates in New York and around the U.S. regarding mask mandates in businesses and schools, I felt I wanted to come speak here today. Just a little bit about myself. My family and I are somewhat newer to the Brighton community. We moved to Brighton a few years ago with our 3 young children. Because of our young children, there were many things to consider when looking for a place to live and raise our family. Brighton stuck out for a couple of reasons. We like the sense of community, the family-friendly environment, the diversity. But the main reason we chose to move to Brighton were the schools. Brighton schools have been known for their wonderful education programs and the state-of-the-art facilities like Council Rock, where our oldest daughter goes. Unfortunately, our introduction to the school district was during a pandemic, as it was for so many. And I know we were all trying to manage this extreme shift and figure out a way to stay safe. I understand that back in 2020, masks seemed to be the best answer for protection. But things have changed. New studies have been released stating why masking children is detrimental for their physical and emotional health, and now more than ever, our children need our help. There's a statement under the Mission and Vision section on the Brighton School website that I just want to read aloud. We believe that we can achieve our vision and accomplish our mission if in all of our work we strive to focus on the needs of children in everything we do and every decision we make. As the schools that we, the parents, have chosen our children to attend, this is the single most important value that we expect to be implemented. It would be for any parent. And yes, on paper, that all sounds wonderful, but actions speak louder than words. I think we're all familiar with that phrase. Actions are what make a difference, and we need action now for our children. The health and well-being of the children is most important, and now is the time to prove it. Keeping masks on children, who majority wear the cloth masks, which the CDC has stated themselves were least effective form of protection, is not proving it. The lunchtime rules and policies we have in place for when students return to school after their quarantine is definitely not proving it. Having random COVID testing for students as young as even kindergartners is definitely not proving it. All of you who sit on the Board of Education are in positions that can truly make a positive difference. You are there to be the voice, to be the influence, and to be the leaders we hope you would be when you got elected. The number one reason for any one of you to be in the seats you are in should be to do what is right by the children of our community. So as the leaders and advocates for our children, what is your plan of action for a better tomorrow? What are you going to really do about this, and how do you want to look back on your time here? However, I believe that all of us truly want the same thing at the end of the day, for the children of this community, the future of this community, to thrive and have happy, healthy environments surrounding them. I hope the science you say you are following is not the political science. This is about what is right versus what is wrong for our children. My hope is that our governor makes the right decision so that come March, we can join the many other states like New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Delaware, etc., and continue moving forward with life. There's always going to be conflicting opinions, there's always going to be conflicting wants, but it should be the parent's choice. It should be optional. That way everyone gets a say, everyone's doing what they truly believe is right for their children. So let's be better. Let's be a district and community of leaders, not followers. And most importantly, let's give these precious children the future they deserve, because enough is enough. And for everyone here, parents, members of the community, I encourage everyone to get out there and vote at the school board elections. I think it's time, as we've seen over the past couple of years, that we have a little bit more diversity of opinion in who makes the policies and rules. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker I have is A.J. Speaker.
A.J. Berman, Brighton resident. Board President Larry Davis, I want to start off with just a simple question. How many eligible voters would you say are within the Brighton Central School District? Ballpark.
I know there's the report I saw from the town is there's 37,000 people in the district, so I don't know how best to extrapolate the number of eligible voters.
Okay. Are there any board members here that can answer that question? I just want to make sure that Kevin's not feeding you any information. I would like to just know what you know.
I just told you what I know.
Okay.
I know we have a little over 37,000.
So I want to give a basic primer. So Lou Alamo shared with me there's a mailing list that goes out to about 11,000 individuals, when the vote comes along. So I'm going to...
Avram, can I just correct you? That's 11,000 residents, I believe, is that
correct?
correct?
Right, 11,000 households of all
Residents.
individual, right. So if we assume that there's one eligible voter per household, and if we assume there's 3, we could say there's potentially 33,000, so it would be accurate to say there's roughly 20,000 somewhere in there eligible voters within the Brighton Central School District?
I can give you the town listing of our population,
Okay.
but I don't know how best to extrapolate from that the number of eligible
Okay,
voters.
right. The reason why I mention that is because we had 600 participants with the thought exchange. So if there's roughly 20,000 voters, that's really not, that's a failure on behalf of the school district in order to. but in any
However,
event-
I just, and I definitely don't want to debate, I just want to actually
Sure.
make sure I'm clarifying a couple of numbers for you.
Yes.
First of all, I don't know, you're assuming when you make that analogy that it's 20,000. I don't know that we can. And the reason why is we don't register voters for elections, right? So there's not a registration to vote in school elections, which is a
Perfectly
different
understand.
type of
I just think it's
process.
important to understand, our publicly elected officials understand exactly what the potential population is of the constituents that they represent. It
What
seems-
would be an acceptable percentage? I'm just.
I think that if we have, I think if we're sending out mailers to 11,000 individual households, like you sent, when you sent out 11,000 ballots,
Right.
that would suggest that there's at least one eligible voter per household. If we said that there was 30, if we multiply that by 3, there's 33,000. If we take the average, there's 22,000. I know tonight, for some reason, there's a restriction of 5 minutes, even though there's only 2 speakers. So I want to recoup my time, because that's not really what I came here to talk about
Yeah, so I'm only going to
tonight.
make one more comment, and I won't interrupt you
Sure.
again. I'll
Okay.
just say this. In terms of qualitative research and the percentage of people from a population to be able to generalize the results, I think that would be an interesting number to look at.
Yeah, maybe we can do a
And by
survey
the way,
and
I'd
reach
agree
out
with
to
you,
them.
having far
Okay.
more than 600 would be great. We welcome all the
Of
feedback we
course,
get. So,
right,
thank you.
okay. So I want to start out here. So I want to bring up one of the points that was, addressed at tonight's meeting. I like the idea of providing property tax relief to first responders, especially those who risk their lives for us. I think it's a great idea. I also think that it's important to also address that subset of our community that is dealing with financial difficulties as a result of the pandemic as well. And I wanted to ask Larry Davis, as the Board of Education president, what are your thoughts about that? How have you gone out and addressed, are there any, mechanisms or processes in place to go out and address that part of our population? And what have you done to go out and try to reach that segment of our population that may be having difficulty, paying the property taxes, due to the pandemic?
Yeah, so we're not set up as a Q&A, but I'll address that question.
Okay.
I don't know that we've taken any specific studies that look at income levels for our families, anything that we do have, and made any specific suggestions to them. There are opportunities for them to get help within existing systems. I don't have specific knowledge on who's accessed that help and who has not.
Okay. One of the things I think we could address before maybe addressing the issue with the discounts for the first responders is the issue of budget surplus. So what the community may not understand is that every year there is a budget surplus within the Brighton Central School District. In fact, since Superintendent Kevin McGowan came on board about 10 years ago, and I got this information from Lou Alamo, in total over the last 10 years, the Brighton Central School District, the community members have been have been billed out over $50 million in excess of the. So we have a budget surplus every year, and the amount of money that is billed out. So, for example, if the tax levy is $55 million, and we get billed out at $65 million, what's in theory supposed to happen is that the $10 million is supposed to be credited back to the community by reducing the tax levy for the following subsequent tax year. So in the last 10 years, the school district has overbilled the community by over $50 million. And if you look at, for example, we have an $80 million budget approximately. And of that $80 million, roughly $50 million is our tax levy, and the other $30 million is subsidized by state, federal, and county money. So if you put that in perspective over the last 10 years, the amount of money that we have been overbilled is the equivalent to 1 year's worth of property taxes. Now, in fairness, some portion of that money has been refunded. And the money that's been refunded has been less than, the amount of money that's been refunded has been less than 50%. So I think that if there's going to be a budget surplus at the end of the year, I think all of the money should go out and be refunded back to the community by offsetting the tax levy in the following year, the total amount. before we go out and start, start asking the community to go out and start paying more money for, subsidies that we're going to give out to other individuals, which I think are good subsidies, for example, like first responders and maybe people that are having difficulty paying their taxes. What are your thoughts on that?
So I just gave you 1 extra minute because of the discourse.
Sure.
So that was at 6.
Yeah, I just wanted to get some feedback maybe from Board President Larry Davis or from Superintendent Kevin McGowan on what your thoughts would be about going out and providing a full refund every year on the budget surplus by applying that surplus amount, and offset the tax levy on the following school year. Because every year the budget increases, right?
Can I just
And
interrupt
so
you?
if you don't give us,
You asked for a response.
Okay,
I'll give you a
sure.
quick response and give the superintendent a chance to respond. I saw, obviously, I was copied on, I think, the 20 years' worth of documentation, maybe it was just 10, that
Yeah.
you asked for. There are very specific legal practices that we have to follow with tax money. We are audited every year. We achieve high marks on our audits. That money is able to be reallocated to keep costs down in areas, and there's a very specific tracking that is public of all of those dollars, any surplus or any deficits. All of that is very publicly tracked and recorded. Lou Limo and his team do an outstanding job of being very public about that, and the external audits we receive tell us that we do an excellent job as stewards of the resources of this community. I'll let Superintendent McGowan add anything.
Right, so to that point, we are audited every year externally and internally, and that external audit points that out as one of the healthy aspects of our balance sheet is the money that is able to be put in reserves. So that's a very standard practice. In fact, our money in reserves is less than what is typically carried by a corporation for cash on hand to operate an efficient organization. Let me just finish, though.
Yeah.
And the allocation each year, community members should know, when we talk about appropriating the fund balance every single year towards the future year levy, we're doing exactly what you'd advocate for, not to the amount that you would advocate for. I understand that. And so we are designating those funds to other reserves, several other reserves, which essentially then pay down another cost on behalf of the taxpayer. So it's going, however, it's not going anywhere else. It is going towards expenses that the district has and reducing that so that it doesn't then have to be budgeted for in the future. For example, there's a retirement reserve. So that is allowed to be used when the retirement system that bills us goes up, which it goes up, and it goes up perhaps more than what you might anticipate. That retirement reserve can be used to pay that bill. That's, you're ensuring yourself that those kinds of unexpected expenses can be paid out of a reserve like that.
I think
And there's a
it's-
variety of examples of
I get
that.
that.
And the capital reserve, which is also used for paying the local share of projects that are done so that you're not incurring more debt and asking people to pay a higher debt service, which again would have to be in the general fund. So point being, it is being used to pay other expenses on behalf of taxpayers. It's not going anywhere else. It's not.
What I'm saying is that I just don't
Yeah.
think it's very transparent if you're asking the community to pay more money in taxes each year on the top end, and then all of a sudden you have money that's not coming back to you in terms of surplus, that's not being used to offset the tax levy in the subsequent tax year. I don't think a lot of community members probably realize that the mechanism in the way in which this works. And all I'm suggesting is that I think that if there's going to be a budget surplus, that the community, the entire surplus should then be used to offset the tax levy in the following year by that amount. And I understand the legal requirements that you can only fund reserve accounts with surplus dollars, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, that is correct.
And I get all that, and I'm not disputing that. I just think that it lacks a certain level of transparency if you're funneling, $20, $30 million into reserve accounts that normally would have been credited back to the taxpayers by reducing the tax levy in the following year. All I'm suggesting is that during these difficult times, that it might not be a bad idea to simply go out, if you overspend, simply go out and provide the community with a full refund by lowering the tax levy in the subsequent year by the full amount rather than funneling more money into the reserve account. Because again, not only are you increasing the budget in the following year, but there's also an added cost to the community members who are not realizing the additional savings from not getting a full refund, in a sense, from the surplus dollars.
Let me just
that
interrupt
aren't
you,
being
because
used to
we're
offset.
way past the minute time.
Right.
There's other people who like to speak, so I would say this to you.
I think there's just two tonight,
When you
right?
talk
No, I
about
didn't.
transparency, the budget, the allocations to each of the reserve funds are done in public session by the board at the end of every year, very transparently. They are discussed, their use is discussed. In the budget process, we discuss the use of the unappropriated fund balance to appropriate towards the tax levy. And in every discussion where we're going to use reserve funds to cover an expense that would otherwise have to be budgeted for, that is publicly disclosed, discussed, and part of the process. So I think there's actually more agreement in what we're saying. When you talk about a full refund, that money that is collected is eventually being refunded to every taxpayer through the use of those reserves to pay down an expense. So I think it's two different ways to get at the same problem. But again, this is not intended to dominate the entire conversation, so
Sure.
thank you.
I would like to stay, and I don't want to be rude, but because the meetings don't ever start on time and are generally 20 to 30 minutes late, I have to leave. So in the future, if it's possible to start the meetings on time, that would be helpful. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Yep. Next requested speaker is Abe.
Hey, good evening. I'll be real quick.
Your name and your
Sure.
school district residence?
Abe, Brighton.
Okay.
Recently, there were a bunch of surveys that went out from the City School District, Fairport, Hilton, and I believe Pittsburgh regarding the mask survey. For both sides of the argument, I think it would be really helpful if Brighton sent one out so that when you do have to make a decision, and trust me, I know it's not going to be easy, at least you have some backup for yourselves, and other residents could also see what everyone else thinks. It just might make things a little bit more easier to discern going forward when you have to make that decision. As always, when I get up here, please hold the line on the taxes. One thing that someone brought up in the thought exchange was sort of an a la carte menu for sports and extracurricular activities. I understand that administering that might be hell, trying to figure that out, but that just might be a thought to help keep costs down.
Abe, can I just share with you,
Sure.
only because we're actually by law not allowed to do that. So that's why you're not allowed in New York State to pay for play. In neighboring states, Massachusetts, for example, they do allow that. So I only say that to you while you're on that train of thought so that you realize that's not something we'd be able to even discuss. So just want to make you aware of that.
Did not know that. I appreciate that.
You bet.
Thinking of thought exchange, I don't know if there's a better way to do it. That's sort of innovative because you can see what everyone else thinks and you can add in your own thoughts. It just seems a bit unwieldy. What I was thinking of was perhaps you set up a time to have comments in, and then everyone can, let's say for a week, and then you take those thoughts and then you react for another week. Because if you got in at the beginning, you had, let's say, 50 or 80 thoughts. I think by the time you were done, you had 300 and odd something. So that just might be a chance for everyone to respond to everything that actually came in, and you could probably perhaps condense them. Like if you had 10 thoughts saying the same thing, just say, hey, we had 10 and this is what it boiled down to. This might be easier to go through because 370 thoughts is, about half hour of clicking if you're actually going to read it. Okay, one more thing, and I hate to bring up stupid conspiracy theories, but the money versus keeping the masks on, from what I could read, the feds had set out, if a state like Florida penalized a school district for having a mask mandate, they were going to reimburse. I assume that's what everyone's getting at, not that if you don't have masks in your school, you'll flat out get cut. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a great question. This has come up multiple times. We have never been threatened with funding around the mask mandate at all. That's never been a consideration. I'm sure within the documentation around the acceptance of federal funds, there's the adherence to guidelines. There's always language regarding that. But I will tell you that because there's a mask mandate in the state of New York, I don't know if that deals with flow-through funds to the state, which is perhaps where that's coming from for people in the conversation about Florida. But just on the district level, that hasn't been an issue for us in terms of do this or you won't get funding. I mean, it essentially is the law, and that's why we're following it. It's not because they said if you don't do it, we won't give you the
It's
money.
being made out to be if you don't have a mask mandate, then you'll get X amount of dollars cut.
Right, and that's never been directed to us.
All right, it's good to know. That's all for tonight. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
That's the last card that I have. Dan's telling me there are no other cards. Good. Then I will call this meeting to an end, this community forum to an end. Thank you.
This has been a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.